Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Welcome to Policy and Rights, the show about human rights and government policy. So this week we had a new appointment to the Governor General position with Mary Simmons, and Mary Simmons is an Inuk activist. She has been a human rights and indigenous rights and Inuit rights activist for more than just a few decades. And she is very seasoned as a diplomat and more than willing to take on the job as Governor General in whatever capacity that the job carries her. She has said that she is willing to, because she's not fluent in French at the moment, she's willing to learn to become more fluent in French so that it will help her perform her duties as Governor General. So that announcement was made this week. Also, this week there was a announcement from Jody Wilson-Raybould about that she's not going to be running for re-election in Vancouver, Granville in British Columbia. And she cites some reasons for that lead us back to another Inuit politician, another Indigenous politician, Mamok, where she stepped away from her position. She's not seeking re-election for her position because of what she described as, to put it mildly, distasteful treatment from while she was active on in Parliament. So the question is, along with some other things that have occurred with residential schools, reconciliation, and a big celebration of a signing in Saskatchewan with the Calvinist people, the Calvinist First Nation. How are Indigenous people actually viewed by the Canadian government, the federal government, as well as provincial governments? Is there a line of equality, or is there still a line of discrimination happening? We also had in the past week that the people with the Lillooet First Nations saying that they were going to do train blockades unless the BC provincial government stepped up efforts with aid and everything after the fire and the wildfire that struck Lytton and more or less flattened the town and the village. So are Indigenous people being seen as equal, or are they being kind of brushed aside? So let's listen to some of the speeches and some of the events that have happened in the past few weeks with the federal and Saskatchewan provincial government and the British Columbia provincial government over Indigenous issues. Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio.
Bonjour à tous. Merci d'être des nôtres. Let me begin by recognizing that we are on the traditional land of the Algonquin people. We acknowledge them as past, present, and future caretakers of this land. Canada is a place defined by people who serve those around them, who tackle big challenges with hope and determination, and above all, who never stop working to build a brighter tomorrow. In other words, people like Mary Simon. Frankly, we need more leaders like Ms. Simon in high office, people who understand what it means to take on real issues and create positive change. And that's exactly what brings us here today. This morning, I can announce that on my recommendation, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II has approved the appointment of Ms. Mary Simon as the 30th Governor-General of Canada. Originaire du Nunavik, dans le nord du Québec, Madame Simon a passé sa vie à travailler au nom de ceux qui l'entourent. Au cours des dernières années, elle a été présidente du Comité national sur l'éducation des Inuits et, avant cela, présidente de l'Inuit Tapirit Kanatami. Tout au long de sa carrière, que ce soit dans la protection d'Inuit Nunangat, Arctique, comme défenseuse des droits et de la culture des Inuits, ou comme animatrice de radio avec CBC, Madame Simon a fait preuve de service dévoué. Je sais que Madame Simon donnera vie à sa vision d'un Canada plus fort pour tous lorsqu'elle occupera cette haute fonction. De ses années d'expérience aux nombreux honneurs qu'elle a reçus, Madame Simon lutte depuis longtemps pour un pays juste et équitable pour tous. Ms. Simon's career of leadership and service has always been one of breaking down barriers. She was the first Inuk to hold a position as a Canadian ambassador, representing Canada as both the ambassador of circumpolar affairs and as our ambassador to Denmark. Madame Simon a travaillé à la mise en œuvre de la première politique sur les revendications territoriales du Canada pour la baie James et le nord du Québec. And now we are honored to have Ms. Simon as Canada's first Indigenous Governor-General. Canada is a big country. Canada is a diverse country. So it is only by reaching out to those around us, it is only by building bridges between people in the north and south, just like in the east and west, that we can truly move forward. Mary Simon has done that throughout her life. I know she will help continue paving that path ahead, and we will all be stronger for it. Today, after 154 years, our country takes a historic step. I cannot think of a better person to meet the moment. With that, it is a true honor to introduce Canada's Governor-General designate, Ms. Mary Simon. Mary.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Prime Minister. First, I just want to say a few words in Inuktitut, so if anybody has a translator. So, urlako ilunasi urlumi nakomero mayunga Canada angayokha maringanik tako hausriyangit urlumi pimariumata Canada sibulipami nunakakasi mayumik inumik inutuinamik dilijimata taktatsamunga Governor General of Canada dayo yumut inihaknearamatana nakomero tiyaratatsuminga Prime Minister mik So I just, to say that in English, I would like to thank the Prime Minister for such a warm and thoughtful introduction and for this very historic opportunity. I would like to acknowledge today also that we are standing on the unceded territory of the Algonquin people who have lived on these lands and waters for thousands of years. Let me begin by conveying in the strongest possible terms that I am honored, humbled, and ready to be Canada's first Indigenous Governor-General. I would also like to thank Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth for placing her trust and confidence in me to represent her in this wonderful country of ours. I can confidently say that my appointment is a historic and inspirational moment for Canada and an important step forward on the long path towards reconciliation. This is a moment that I hope all Canadians feel part of because my appointment reflects our collective progress towards building a more inclusive, just and equitable society. Inutituka na lang ang miga mamana kindaw mga hawye maya walwak sunga misunu kisiya ni ilang ino hawye maya ngina mami makan Mary May Simon nguyunga Mary May mi atakakatulok simayunga inusutusunga amalo inutitut ataka ningi ukalak Quebec mi ukiok tatu mi nuna haktunga mana nuna vimik tayaw sungulaktok ana naga inulak simayok inutuin na suni halunati to kayakani amalo atataga halunangot suni halunanungan ni pisimayok ang ayok kakayaw hatalok simayok Hudson Bay Company kunun pegok sa sunga tamani nuna vimisi mayong atay mangani amalo inusaka inutitut piusibun ni atok sunga pegok simayunga. So permit me a moment to tell you a little bit about myself. I was born Mary Jeannie May. My Inuk name is Ningiukarlak in Arctic Quebec, now known as Nunavik. My mother was Inuk and my father was from the south, was manager of the local Hudson Bay Company post. I spent my adolescence in Nunavik, living a very traditional lifestyle. Many months out of the year, we camped and lived on the land, hunted, fished, and gathered food, and maintained an active connection with our Inuit heritage and language. Part of my cultural tradition as an Inuk are the strong bonds that are created across the generations. My grandmother Jeannie and my mother Nancy were my teachers and mentors, and these influences continue today. They both instilled in me a boundless energy for learning, self-improvement, and helping my community. They also taught me to always be proud of who I am and to keep my mind open to other points of view. From my father, I learned about the South and the non-native world from a man who had a profound love and respect for the North, its people and its natural beauty. Combined with these experiences, allowed me to be a bridge between the different lived realities that together make up the tapestry of Canada. I can relate to all people, no matter where they live, what they hope for, or what they need to overcome. As time passed, my work often took me south. I spent my adult life fighting for Indigenous and human rights, pushing for increased access for health care and access for mental health services, and working hard to build better educational outcomes for our children. So it's fair to say I've grown up twice, once in the northern Canada and once in southern Canada. As Governor General, I am fully committed to setting and maintaining the highest possible standard of work and ethic in all aspects of my duties. Je prête au sérieux mon rôle de défenseur de la diversité culturelle et linguistique qui rend le Canada unique. I take very seriously my role as an ambassador for the cultural and linguistic diversity that makes Canada unique. I do want to be clear about something. My bilingualism is Inuktitut and English. However, based on my experience growing up in Quebec, I was denied the chance to learn French during my time in the federal government day schools. I am deeply committed to continuing my French language studies and plan to conduct the business of the Governor General in both of Canada's official languages as well as Inuktitut, one of many Indigenous languages spoken across the country. Indeed, my appointment comes at an especially reflective and dynamic time in our shared history. During my time as Governor General, I will work every day towards promoting healing and wellness across Canadian society. Takani pinasuwakinyak takani Governor General Ngulunga ulutamatsia pinasuhatolangabunga mamisaknek pichutigilugu ammalu inusakhatsiaga harnit kanatamiulimat ilunalimatsia tatamani kanatamiungugatta. To me, that means stopping to fully recognize, memorialize, and come to terms with the atrocities of our collective past that we are learning more about each day. It means we must thoughtfully work hard towards the promise of a better tomorrow. I believe we can build a hopeful future in a way that is respectful of what has happened in the past. It means supporting the well-being of people by focusing on our youth and improved educational outcomes for all of our children. It means prioritizing the protection of our natural world so that we can have a healthy climate and planet for generations to come. I believe strongly that if we embrace our common humanity and shared responsibility for one another, Canada's brightest days are yet to come. I am dedicated to doing everything in my power to build and inspire that future. And to all the women and girls out there, please know that we need more of your voices and perspectives in leadership positions across this country. I hope you use my appointment to believe with increased conviction that anything is possible. To the Canadian Armed Forces, I am honored to soon be taking on the role as your new Commander-in-Chief. I want to thank you for your tireless efforts in the fight against COVID-19 here in Canada and your operations being conducted worldwide. I am greatly looking forward to meeting the men and women of the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Canadian Rangers during my tenure. There is much to be done. We need and support of all of Canadians and our governments to rebuild strong, healthy families and communities. I would like to close by again thanking the Prime Minister for his commitment to reconciliation and the courage it took to appoint me to the position of Governor General. I can't wait to roll up my sleeves to embark on our work together, and may wisdom and compassion guide our efforts. Thank you. Merci. Nakokmik, Huyanamik.
Thank you, Ms. Simmons. We'll now take questions from the media. Bonjour, Raymond Filion de TVA. Si vous pouvez répondre, M. Trudeau, dans les deux langues officielles, anglais et français, j'aimerais savoir si vous avez une entente avec Mme Simon pour un déclenchement d'élection, parce qu'avec sa domination aujourd'hui, tout est en place pour un déclenchement électoral très prochainement. Et à vous, Mme Simon, j'aimerais savoir si vous avez discuté du déclenchement prochain d'une élection avec M. Trudeau, si vous avez une entente avec lui pour le déclenchement d'une élection cet été.
Merci, Raymond. Je veux d'abord prendre l'occasion pour remercier le juge en chef Wagner d'avoir si bien rempli les fonctions d'administrateur pendant qu'on n'avait pas de gouverneur général. Il faisait ça en plus de son rôle habituel qui implique beaucoup de travail comme juge en chef de la Cour suprême. Je veux souligner que c'est important et c'est important qu'on ait un gouverneur général, une gouverneure générale en place pour le Canada. Donc, je suis très content d'être ici pour pouvoir annoncer Mme Simon comme notre prochaine gouverneure générale, mais on n'a pas parlé d'élection du tout.
Would you like to answer, Ms. Simon? Did you discuss at all the possibility of dropping the writ in the coming months?
Today is the first day of my appointment, and I have not talked to the Prime Minister about the election. And as a Governor General, I do understand through the briefings and the work that I will do in the future that my parliamentary responsibilities are very important, as are my responsibilities as Commander-in-Chief of the Canadian Forces, and I give due regard to these very important roles, but at this time I have not talked about the election at all.
Thank you. I want to take the opportunity to first thank Chief Justice Wagner for having fulfilled the role of administrator during a time in which we haven't had a Governor General. It has been something that he has done with his habitual excellence on top of his significant duties as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. I'm very pleased to be announcing Ms. Simon as our next Governor General of this country, but we have not talked elections. Our focus is on this historic day and on how we move forward to make sure that we're bringing Canadians together from coast to coast to coast.
En suivi, M. Trudeau, vous avez beaucoup, vous et votre gouvernement, parlé dernièrement de l'importance de la langue française. Vous nommez aujourd'hui Mme Simon, qui est bilingue, mais qui ne parle pas pour l'instant français. Qu'est-ce que vous répondez à ceux et celles qui risquent d'y voir une grosse contradiction de votre part?
Je comprends que c'est un enjeu sur lequel il va falloir qu'on se penche et que je me suis penché avec ce groupe de Canadiens imminents qui ont fait partie du comité de sélection. Ça fait des mois qu'ils ont travaillé, qu'on a tous travaillé ensemble pour établir un processus et amener de l'avant des noms de Canadiens extraordinaires qui pourraient servir en tant que gouverneur général. Et je suis très content de pouvoir annoncer Mme Simon comme prochaine gouverneure générale. Elle est née au nord du Québec. Sa langue maternelle, c'est l'inuktitut. Elle a appris une langue seconde, l'anglais, dans l'école fédérale où elle est allée, parce qu'il n'enseignait pas le français dans ces écoles-là dans les années 50. C'est une réalité. Elle comprend tout à fait, parce qu'on a eu des conversations longues là-dessus, comprend tout à fait l'importance de pouvoir bien représenter tous les Canadiens, et c'est pour ça qu'elle s'engage justement à prendre des leçons et apprendre le français. Mais je vais permettre et je vais demander à Mme Simon de partager ses réflexions là-dessus, parce qu'on a, comme on a eu des conversations là-dessus.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Yes, this is a very important question, and I am firmly committed to learning French. I've taken a number of French lessons, and I've always wanted to learn French, but never really had the opportunity because of my work was full-time all my life. But I've worked in Quebec City quite a bit, and it seems to me that because we have common issues to discuss, that we can find ways to get rid of the barrier in terms of language. But that doesn't mean that I'm not going to make a commitment. I have made a commitment to learn French, and I'm ready to start any day after my installation to work at Rideau Hall in the 2 official languages. And I'm sure there will be lots of people there that will actually help me learn to speak French.
Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Omia Lacocot is a courageous woman. She is a woman who is standing up for her people. She is a woman who ran for office with the idea of helping the Inuit people of Nunavut. They're trying to bring resources to help her people thrive and grow, to help them get out of, as she would call it, survival mode. Trying to break down the barriers of racism and systems that were built on the backs of the Indigenous people, but yet they were built to suppress the Indigenous people. She has been working with the NDP and Jagmeet Singh to try to bring about real change for a group of people who need that change, while the rest of Canada is thriving, living well, receiving high-tech medical aid, and having stable roofs over our heads. The Inuit people of Nunavut have been struggling just to get the basics. Just to be able to move from what would be third world conditions into livable conditions.
Matna. Mr. Speaker, every time I walk onto House of Common grounds, speak in these chambers, I am reminded every step of the way I don't belong here. I have never felt safe or protected in my position, especially within the House of Commons, often having pep talks with myself in the elevator or taking a moment in the bathroom stall to maintain my composure. When I walk through these doors, not only am I reminded of the clear colonial house on fire I am willingly walking into, I am already in survival mode. Since being elected, I expect to be stopped by security at my workplace. I've had security jog after me down hallways, nearly put their hands on me, and racial profile me as a member of parliament. I know what to do in these situations. My life in Canada, and especially through this experience, has taught me many things. As a brown woman, do not move too quickly or suddenly. Do not raise your voice. Do not make a scene. Maintain eye contact. And don't hide your hands. Every Inuk has survival mode. We have to. No, not 2 generations ago, survival mode meant endurance of extreme temperatures and finding food throughout the winter. Now survival mode means being able to see that warmth in shelter and affordability in livelihood, but being denied it at the hands of the federal government. The federal institution needs to change its own policies and procedures to reflect reality instead of creating barriers for people like me. I shouldn't be afraid of going into work. No one should be afraid of going into work. It is possible to create change. It can be started here in the House of Commons and reflected in Canada. There is a refusal and unwillingness for change, not an inability to accomplish it. People like me don't belong here in the federal institution. I'm a human being who wants to use this institution to help people, but the reality is that this institution and the country has been created off the backs, trauma, and displacement of Indigenous people. Even if we're told we should run, we still face huge barriers. Young people have been told they are not experienced enough, not ready to lead. Women have been told to sit pretty and listen. Disabled individuals have been shown they aren't even worth the conversations, and Inuit kill themselves at the highest rate in the country. We are facing a suicide epidemic, and this institution refuses to care. During my time in this chamber, I have heard so many pretty words like reconciliation, diversity, and inclusion. I have been called courageous, brave, and strong by people outside of my party. But let me be honest, brutally honest, nice words with no action hurt when they are uttered by those with power over the federal institution and refuse to take action. There is nothing to take pride in the legacy this institution continues to not only maintain, but to build and fuel. People in power have choices, and they consistently choose priorities that uphold systems of oppression, leaving babies sick in moldy homes, parents missing their passed on children because these powerful individuals don't think change is worth the money. Recently, I asked a minister what he would do in my shoes. If his riding had the highest rates of suicide, with the most homes in need of repair, if women and girls were going missing in his community and children were being into the foster care system without regard for their well-being, how would he feel? I asked if the minister would change his answer if I told him to keep waiting. And he couldn't answer me. He said he would never even try to place himself in my shoes. But that's exactly what the problem is. Inuit have been telling those with power and ability to make change to try and survive in their shoes for 1 day, 1 week, 1 month. They couldn't. Maybe it is impossible for ministers to understand what we go through every day, but I am urging you, telling you to listen, believe us, and do something about it. When we tell you to act now, you need to act now. And if you understand, then shame on you. Because if you understand how much this hurts, you understand how deep it cuts. It would be easier for me to be told that I am wrong and that you disagree than to be told I am right and I'm courageous, but there is no room in your budget for basic human rights that so many others take for granted. You see, Mr. Speaker, I don't belong here, but my presence, I hope, is starting to crack the foundations of this very federal institution that started colonizing Inuit barely 70 years ago. I realize that this is difficult for some members to hear, but it's the reality and the truth. This place was built on the oppression of Indigenous peoples. People like my grandfather who were born and raised on the land but forcibly relocated into settlement that was financed and built by the federal institution. Our history is stained with blood. Children, youth, adults, and elders' blood. It's time to face the scale of justice. On one side, we have a mountain of suffering, and whenever the government gives us a grain of sand of support, they seem to think the trauma from our past has been rectified, that somehow they deserve a pat on the back. But it will take a mountain of support to even begin the healing process. As long as these halls echo with empty promises instead of real action, I will not belong here. Although I may not belong in this institution, I do belong in my party. The NDP has always been a party committed to uplifting voices of all those of all different backgrounds, often ignored by the federal institution. I'd like to thank my leader, the member for Burnaby South, for listening to me and making me feel safe and comfortable to voice what I need to. While members from other parties have come to me asking me to advocate for an issue their parties focus to retouch, I never felt muzzled by the NDP. I could never join another party, and I am a proud New Democrat. Thank you to my colleagues. Thank you to members from Westminster, Burnaby, North Island, Powell River, and especially Hamilton Centre for always having my back. Without my NDP colleagues, I wouldn't have such a great platform that is true in the want to do more, to do better, and to do right. I'd also like to thank, of course, my number one supports, my mother and father, Pia and Jimmy, and my brother Lars, for everything from day one. A huge, huge shout out to my staff. I could not have survived without you guys. All the things that come out of my office, everything I'm so proud of, I know I couldn't have done it with you. I'm so grateful for you. Of course, ultimately, thank you from the bottom of my heart to Inuit and Nunavummiut who believe in me and support me. The encouraging messages have meant more than people will ever know. I'd like to thank Bautatik for always standing up for Inuit women and girls like me and speaking truth to power even when it's inconvenient. I will always fight for human rights of Indigenous peoples in Nunavut and across the country. I believe that we are living through a shift in this country where Canadians are starting to wake up to the reality. I'm looking forward to a time where people like me could belong here, a time we can be here. I hope another young or Inuk or woman or all three will follow in my footsteps and continue pushing this institution to support Indigenous peoples in Canada. I have shown the nation and the world that impossible is possible, that hope can grow where it's purposely put out, and that if we work together and use our voices, we can influence real change. I will always believe politics can look, feel, and be different. It can, it has, it started. We will keep it going. We must all ensure it does. Matna, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio.
Cadmus natisikasu ni tukama kanyuin kausis isquingunik. I say good morning to you all. My name is Chief Cadmus Delorme of the Cowes First Nation. Before I begin on the Merivale Residential School story, I just wanted to emphasize that the recent story of the Kamloops Residential School, 215 found graves, has triggered many across this country. And I just wanted to start off by reading two numbers that anybody that what I will share that may re-trigger that you can call. If you are looking for the residential school line to help with mental emotional, you could call it 1-866 925-4419. If you're more local in the Treaty 4 territory in southern Saskatchewan, we do have a line that's going to be open this afternoon. We have partnered with Regina Treaty Status Indian Services, and you could call them at 306-522-7494. In 1886, the Roman Catholic Church in the Oblades arrived on Cowes First Nation. And that is when the grave site began. In 1898, the Merivale Residential School opened its doors, and it closed its doors in 1996. The Roman Catholic Church overseen the grave site. The Catholics and the prayer and religion overseeing the grave site. We started our radar penetrating research on June the 2nd of 2021. As of yesterday, we have hit 751 unmarked graves. This is not a mass grave site. These are unmarked graves. Over the past years, the oral stories of our elders, of our survivors, and friends of our survivors have told us stories that knew these burials were here. In 1960, there may have been marks on these graves. The Catholic Church representatives removed these headstones, and today they are unmarked graves.
Our local host chief, ladies and gentlemen, also our chicken dancer extraordinaire, Chief Captain Dillon.
Nanaskaman. Tapway Poko Mio Kisagaw. It's a beautiful day today. Ogamao Cadmus Natisi Kasu. Nitugama Kaniwin Cowses is Squingwinik. My name is Chief Cadmus Delorme, and I'm a proud Cowses citizen. I welcome our guests, Prime Minister Trudeau, Premier Moe, and all friends and family of Cowes First Nation. At one time, before treaty, our ancestors roamed this land. There was no children in care. There was no unemployment. Everybody had a role. Everybody had a duty, and everybody had a purpose. At the time of treaty, Cowes First Nation, this is what we envisioned was the following. 2 canoes going down the river. The Crown, which today represents our Prime Minister and our Premier, and the Cowes First Nation canoe, side by side. And we were supposed to flow down this river together, every generation exchanging a child to know the ideology in that canoe and then give those children back, so we always coincided. Unfortunately, today we inherited a history where that didn't happen. In our Cowes canoe at one time was the Indian Act, which is still here today. At one time, the residential school was put in our canoe. At one time, the 60s scoop was put in our canoe. And our Causes citizens fought. Our leaders fought to make sure our kids could still dance today. Today we all inherited that. Prime Minister Trudeau, Premier Mo, and all their team didn't create this. We all inherited this today. And because of that, we have a little bit of loss of control, a little bit of loss of language, a little bit of loss of governance, a little bit of loss of our social and even our individual lives. One of the major things that happened is what you call vertical lineage pass down. If residential schools, 60s Scoop, Indian Act weren't here, Kokum would have passed down to mom. Mom would have passed down to daughter. Daughter would have passed down to granddaughter, as it should have been. But because of 4 generations of residential school, it became horizontal. Kokum had to stand beside her cousin to survive. Mom had to stand beside her sister and cousin to survive. And today, that lineage is coming back. That vertical lineage, one day at a time. And we are gaining control. Because of the federal government investing with Causes, we now farm our lands again. Because Premier Mo and the government of Saskatchewan worked with Causes for renewable energy, we're about to build a 10 megawatt solar field. We got turbines. We are gaining strength one day at a time. But as we move forward, we got a lot of healing to do. I asked 3 friends, family, that are sitting beside us. Rob, give us a wave. Kevin, give us a wave. Nicole, give us a wave. These are proud Causes citizens. And at one time, they were in the system. And we didn't find them. Today, they came home. Nicole, Rob, and Kevin, I'm sorry, and you're home now. Today, we give birth to a new horizon. Chief Red Bear Children's Lodge. Today is a historical day because we never gave up our sovereignty to our children. And today, with the Prime Minister of Canada and the Premier of Saskatchewan, we are going to sign a coordination agreement. And what that means is Prime Minister Trudeau stands beside Causes and invests in us as we heal at our pace. Premier Mo stands beside us as Causes First Nation and invests at our pace as we grow. And the end goal is one day there will be no children in care. I'm 39 years old. I hope that happens in my lifetime. But Causes, we have a lot of work to do. And every day we will roll up our sleeves to make sure that every child, when we call them home, that they know where home is, and that is Causes First Nation, and that they will dance, they will get their education, and they will walk with their chin up and be a proud Causes citizen. The Naskamun, thank you very much.
You know, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me the honor and pleasure to introduce also a very young leader, also an individual, no stranger to Canada. His spirit name is one who tries hard. Ladies and gentlemen, let's bring him to the podium. Our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau.
Miigwech, Chief Delorme, for inviting me to your community. Kikinaskamutun. You know, I know there's a lot of people here who've had the privilege of seeing your chicken dance. I wish I had been there. But I know that everybody here is incredibly grateful that you are here, not as a dancer, but as a chief. We are lucky to have you as such a strong chief. Thank you all for your welcome back here to Cowessess. I was here 6 or 7 years ago before I became Prime Minister, and I have wonderful memories of getting to know Cadmus back then and getting to know this community a little bit. So it is truly an honor to be here on this historic moment. I'm very glad we're joined by my friend Premier Mo. It's good to have you here. It's important that we be here as partners. As a country and as a government, we've been reminded over the past few weeks that the path to reconciliation means recognizing past wrongs and working to do better. It is shameful that here in Cowessess and across the country, children died because of the policy of residential schools. Later today, I'll be visiting the site of unmarked graves to pay my respects and sitting down with many of you to hear your stories as survivors. Canada must acknowledge the truth, but we must also understand the truth. Even as Canadians from coast to coast to coast are shaking their heads and feeling guilty and terrible about the shameful past that we are coming to grips with as a nation. It is something that communities like here in Cowessess have known for years, decades, generations. The harm done by residential schools, the broken intergenerational links, the legacy of intergenerational trauma that continues. But even as non-Indigenous Canadians reflect on the history of residential schools, they must also reflect on the fact that at the same time residential schools were teaching Indigenous children that they had no worth, had no value, that their culture had no worth or value, that their languages didn't matter, that their traditions were irrelevant. At the same time as those harmful policies and teachings were inflicted upon generations of proud Indigenous people. In non-residential schools across the country, ordinary schools, so-called, where non-Indigenous Canadians went to, those same messages of the lack of value in Indigenous knowledge, traditions, cultures, language were being spread, were being taught. And as we talk about reconciliation today, it is not just about Indigenous peoples and governments who wronged them, although that's certainly a part of it. It's also about non-Indigenous Canadians understanding that not only what generations of Canadians were taught was wrong, but it was harmful. And it led to the creation of policies and institutions and ways of doing things in this country that didn't respect, acknowledge, or value the extraordinary strength and worth and contributions of Indigenous people, of Indigenous communities, of Indigenous knowledge. So we have not to just fix the wrongs of residential schools and the impacts on your communities, but the work of reconciliation is work that must be joined by all Canadians. Because in all our institutions, in all our ways of doing things, the echoes of those wrong-headed teachings resonate in ways that we are only beginning to come to grips with. And when I see and get to participate in such wonderful moments of community, of celebration, of strength, of culture, of depth, of language, of love, of respect and harmony for nature, these are things that mustn't just be there for strong Indigenous communities. They must be there for all Canadians to draw on. The work of reconciliation won't transform Indigenous communities alone and Indigenous people in Canada alone. The work of reconciliation must and will transform all of Canada and all Canadians. That's the work we have to do together. And of course, as we do that, it needs to start with children. That's the heartbreaking awakening that Canadians have had across the country with the discovery of these graves. That's why we're here today, to do better by this generation and future generations of children and families. Together with Cowessess First Nation and Saskatchewan, the Government of Canada is signing the first ever coordination agreement under the Act respecting First Nations, Inuit, Métis children, youth, and families. That has been the work of reconciliation that communities like Cowessess has led on over the past many years. That we can come together to sign this today, mere weeks after the tragic discoveries, is because over the past years, leaders like Chief Cadmus and others have stepped up to help us co-create legislation that recognizes that child and family services that take kids from their communities and remove them from their cultures, from their languages, from their land, is not the path forward that we need to walk as a country. And that kids need to be kept by and protected by, supported by, and taught by their communities. So we co-developed legislation called C-92 that will ensure that as we move forward, kids get the support they need and the protection they need, driven by their own communities, in their own languages, in their cultures, that no kids finally will be removed from the communities that they are part of. That is the goal, and that is what we are signing the very first agreement all across the country to start today in Cowessess. Never again should kids be taken from their homes, families, and communities. The act we passed in June 2019 makes sure of that. To support this agreement, we're investing $38.7 million for the implementation of the Cowessess First Nations Child and Family Services System. This is an important step forward. And at the end of the day, it'll mean fewer children and youth in care. And across the country, we are working with other First Nations to reach similar agreements. My commitment is this, that we will continue to work as a partner with all communities on what they need to keep their children safe and thriving. Lorsque les enfants des Premières Nations,
when children from First Nations, Inuit, and Métis grow up in their own communities, surrounded by their culture, the people who love them, they have better opportunities to flourish and to succeed. And I know that that is what we all wish for throughout Canada and for all children.
Chief Delorme graciously accepted a braid of sweetgrass in order of today's agreement, and as my pledge to work in partnership and unity with all groups to make this goal a reality. We will continue to walk the path of reconciliation and respond to the priorities of Indigenous people on child and family services reform. We will, every step of the way, be there as partners to focus on what's best for your children, for all of our children, because that's what they need. And that's what they deserve. Again, thank you, Cadmus, for welcoming me to your community for this really important occasion, not just for Cowessess, but for all of Canada. Miigwech.
Thank you. At this time, we'd like to call up our next speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, he's no stranger to ranching and farming and understanding of the livelihood of Saskatchewan people, especially Saskatchewan First Nation. The farming abilities of our people and understanding of the land. Ladies and gentlemen, let's bring them to the podium with a big round of applause. Our Premier, Scott Moe.
Thank you very much, Howie. I was a little concerned about how that introduction might go listening to your jokes here earlier today. But, welcome everyone. Prime Minister, welcome to Saskatchewan, to Cowessess. It's an honor to be with you here today. Cadmus, welcome and thank you for the passion that you bring to your words here today, but the passion that you bring to the words that you bring to people in this community, in this province, in this nation, each and every day. You're a true leader and a true friend. Thank you, Cadmus, for having us here today. To all the elders that we met with earlier, to all of those honored guests, I have a number of colleagues here today. We have the Honourable Don McMorris, we have Laurie Carr, we have Steve Bonk, who is the MLA for this area. Welcome. Welcome to everyone as we gather in the spirit of reconciliation to celebrate what is truly a historic partnership between three levels of government here at Cowessess. These have not been easy times. The last number of weeks in particular have not been easy times here in Cowessess. They've not been easy times in Saskatchewan or across Canada. I am here and pleased to be part of this agreement today in your community. I'm also here to ensure that this community of Cowessess and other communities across this province know that Saskatchewan people send their love, they send their prayers, and they send their gratitude to everyone in Cowessess. They want you to know that as we walk through the next number of days, weeks, months, years, that we're going to do that together. We as Saskatchewan people will be with you every step of the way, regardless of where that road takes us. Your healing journey is our healing journey as well. As Chief Delorme had so eloquently put it, none of us living here today created the residential school system. None of us created the Indian Act. None of us that are here today. But all of us have a duty as we look forward and look ahead to work together to deal with the consequences of those decisions from generations ago. We have a duty, we have an obligation to build a brighter future for all of us. We can do that, and we can do that together. That's what brings us together here this afternoon. The desire to build a brighter future for this community, maybe not even for us, but for that next generation, for our children and for our grandchildren. Ladies and gentlemen, as I said, we're very proud to be a part of this agreement today and the work and the lead up to this agreement here today. It is truly, as the Prime Minister said, a groundbreaking agreement that will give Cowessess control over child and family services that are delivered to your children, delivered to community members, wherever they live. It's an agreement that will ensure that the children of Cowessess are raised by families in their own community, their own culture, in accordance with your own traditions. Today is, yes, the culmination of many months of negotiations by a number of levels of government. Negotiations that were driven by your chief, Chief Cadmus DeLorme, who was absolutely determined to see this agreement through here today and to see Cowessess exert its independence in this area. And thank you for your determination, Chief. Prime Minister, I also want to thank you, and I want to thank your colleagues for the passing of Bill C-92, the legislation that opened the door for us to have these negotiations and ultimately have this agreement, this celebration, to proceed forward together here today. Thank you, Prime Minister. I'm also very grateful as well to our provincial colleagues, my provincial colleagues that also worked on this agreement. What started with Paul Merriman, who has now been moved off to brighter pastures in the health portfolio. But to Laurie Carr, who has brought those negotiations together on behalf of the province. Thank you, Laurie, for your hard work and effort. And to all of the provincial officials, federal officials, and those here in Cowessess that worked to ensure that this could happen here today. Ladies and gentlemen, we have been through some trying days, as I mentioned, during the last few weeks. And there are difficult days ahead of us, no doubt, as we continue to deal with the legacy of residential schools in our nation. But today's announcement, I think we would all agree, is a ray of hope. It's a ray of hope for Cowessess, yes. It's a ray of hope for other Indigenous communities in Canada. It's a ray of hope for our province of Saskatchewan. And I would say that it's a ray of hope for our entire nation. And it's no surprise that that hope is originating right here in this community of Cowessess. This is a progressive community. It leads in so many other areas as well. The production of renewable energy, which we mentioned earlier. In farming, now farming 4,500 acres here in Cowessess. In tourism. In education. And now in the delivery of child and family services. Cowessess is most certainly a community that is on the move, working in partnership with the provincial and the federal government. And what's happening here is now has the opportunity to be replicated in other First Nations communities across the nation. Our Indigenous communities are a major tailwind for all of Canada, and they are helping in great ways make our nation strong. So let me close with this. A few years ago, Chief DeLorme, he'd said his goal was to be able to look back on his life with pride at the ripe old age of 39 today. I think many of us would agree that we would all like to be in that position. Chief DeLorme had set that goal by the time he was old and gray, and at 39 he most certainly is not. But at a time when he'd be old and gray, sitting at home, playing golf with a handicap, and if you've played golf with Chief DeLorme, you know that his handicap isn't very high, but when he's old and gray, his handicap would be obviously much higher. He wanted to look back and he wanted to say, you know, our ancestors are very, very proud of what we're achieving here today. Well, I think when you look at what we're achieving at Cowessess, in the community of Cowessess today, I don't think you're going to have to wait for a higher handicap. I don't think you're going to have to wait until you're old and gray. I think that your ancestors are extremely proud of what you have achieved here today, Chief Cadmus DeLorme. I think they're proud of the entire community, and I think I can speak on behalf of everyone in this province when we are so very proud of the partnership that we have formulated over the last number of years and with the achievement that we see before us here today. Your ancestors are very proud.
Canada is a country that needs to find in government policies the ideals that everyone is equal and everyone deserves a chance. Everyone's culture is important and should be celebrated. We can no longer allow discrimination in systems. We can't allow discrimination in our society any longer. We have to find a way to all come together and celebrate each other for being human beings, and human beings that have a right to happiness, prosperity, and abundance of good. So thank you for listening to Policy and Rights today. I'm Michael Clogs, and we want to thank you all here at Depictions Media for joining us. This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.